Iran has tightened security controls across major cities as the military confrontation with Israel deepens and as Donald Trump considers U.S. involvement in the conflict. This comes as the Israeli military began a new wave of attacks targeting Tehran. Israel's military said it struck an Iranian centrifuge production facility and multiple weapons manufacturing sites in the latest round of strikes between the two. Meanwhile, 3 unmanned aerial vehicles launched from Iran were intercepted earlier, according to Israeli officials. A surface-to-air missile was also fired at an Israeli drone, though it fell inside Iran without casualties. Moreover, according to reports, Israel is running low on its defense interceptors. A U.S. official has confirmed that Washington is worried about supply shortages, even as the U.S. continues to support Israel with defensive systems. A Washington-based rights group has said that over 580 people have been killed in Iran, including 239 civilians and over 1,300 injured. Israel has also sustained losses, with at least 24 people dead and hundreds injured, following over 400 missiles and drones fired by Iran in retaliation. On the other hand, tensions flared after Iranian officials accused European Commission Vice President Kaja Kallas of ignoring Israel's nuclear arsenal while criticizing Iran's nuclear program. Iran's ambassador to Geneva also told the UN Human Rights Council that targeting Iran's nuclear facilities risks hazardous leaks and constitutes war against humanity. Meanwhile, Iran's former economy minister has urged that for 100 days all oil and LNG cargoes should require Iran's permission to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. However, this has not been confirmed by the government yet. This comes as a cruise ship said to be carrying evacuees fleeing Israel arrived in Cyprus after thousands were left stranded by the closure of Israel's airspace. Now we have guests joining us for this discussion. Peter Bohm, he's a foreign editor at Weekly Blitz, joining us live from London. Thank you for joining us today. Could this 6th day of conflict tip over into direct confrontation between the US and Iranian forces, especially in proxy regions like Iraq or Syria?
The United States assists Israel in attacking Iran. That is for sure, because I think what we are now agreed upon, that the Israel and the United States want to see a complete change of regime. If that happens, it may be the case that Iran's proxies in Iraq certainly may start attacking US assets, but it's doubtful whether the Iran's proxies in Syria will have the will or indeed the ability now to assist other Iranian proxies in attacking US assets. So in Iraq, potentially. In Syria, I don't see it. And as we've seen in Lebanon with the Houthis, who have been completely decimated, and Hamas being weakened day by day, those other Iranian proxies will not assist at all. What the Houthis can muster is an unknown quantity. They're totally reliant on Iran, as we know, but it's been quite interesting that in the last 6 days, the Houthis have been, from a military point of view, non-existent. So we don't really know what's going on in Yemen with the Houthis and why they haven't been more active in assisting the Iranians in their defense and attacking of Israel.
Now shifting focus to Trump's comments, if Vice President J.D. Vance or envoy Steve Witkoff were to be sent to Iran, what would that signal about U.S.'s willingness to engage diplomatically?
I think they're running a two-tier strategy here. One, they've always got to keep the diplomatic door open, and if it fails, they can always blame the Iranians for its failure. So by continuing on diplomacy, that's what one would expect of any of any nation. However, I do believe that Trump would rather diplomacy failed and that regime change through military force could be achieved. And we're already seeing more and more the exiled Shah of Iran, or his son, I should say, featuring more and more on mainstream television channels, on social media all the time. Even a strategy for the first 100 days of his rule should Khamenei and his totalitarian theocracy be defeated. So I think the two-tier strategy, military and diplomatic, are both currently running parallel with one another, with the expectation that the diplomacy will fail and the military strategy will take precedent.
And Israel recently struck an Iranian centrifuge production facility and weapons plants. What is the strategic importance of these sites, and how does targeting them alter the conflict's dynamic?
Clearly, any such attack is further going to weaken the Iranian inability to respond militarily and to pose more of a military threat than they were able to respond. That will put pressure on them diplomatically for sure. So the dynamics will change. Again, going back to what I said on the two-tier strategy of diplomacy and militarily, the continuous attacks by Israel on such sites within Iran will achieve Israel's objective of weakening the Iranian position, both diplomatically and militarily, and may have to bring them to the table. There is one other thing going on, which I'm not sure whether you're going to make reference to, but the latest news I've had from my sources is that yesterday there was quite a major cyber attack on an Iranian bank, one of the biggest banks in the region, and a bank very well known to me because in my previous life I used to do quite a lot of business with them. Bank SIPA of Iran, which is now controlled by the IRGC. There was a huge cyber attack on them which completely put their computer systems and ability to function out the whole of yesterday and indeed carrying on into today. And moreover, there's been another cyber attack on an organization that assists the Iranian regime with their cryptocurrency, a method by which they've been able to fund some of their purchase of weapons and also to fund their proxies within the region. And we're not sure of the exact amount, but from what I'm gathering, tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars has been hacked from that crypto site. So there's the military strategy going on, the diplomatic strategy going on, and a third tier, which I should have mentioned earlier, and that's the abilities of the Israelis to hack into the Iranian banks, and the economic strategy, I should say.
Building on your answer, is there any chance that these cyber attacks carried by Iranians or Iran will they start targeting U.S. allies as well?
Sorry, let me just be clear on your question. The attacks, the cyber attacks so far have the successful cyber attacks on both the bank and the cryptocurrency accounts have been by Israel on Iran. Now, clearly, Iran do have the technical expertise to counter such cyber attacks with cyber attacks of their own. But their position has been so weakened both by the number of people who are leaving Tehran, technicians, professionals, experts in all these fields. We've seen from satellite pictures of the tens of thousands of people queuing up to get petrol to leave the city. So it's doubtful whether, from a personnel point of view, the Iranians currently have the ability to damage the Israeli economy through cyber attacks, as Israel has damaged their economy through cyber attacks.
Peter, thank you for clarifying me over there. And there are reports that Israel is running low on missile interceptors, and the US has expressed concern about that. How critical is this shortage, and what might be the implications if Israel cannot replenish its defense systems?
Now, this itself would completely change the dynamics and in Iran's favour. The report, I understand, came from as yet an unknown diplomatic source within the US administration, and if true, and if Israel is running short of such equipment, then that puts Israel in a very, very vulnerable position, which would mean more and more of the ballistic missiles from Iran will get through to Israel and damage. That would really put pressure on the Israeli government as more damage and more deaths are reported. But I must reiterate, it's so far come from one source that I've not yet been able to verify. Perhaps you may have. I'm double checking and checking on this, but as yet the information has not come through who the source came from. But as I said, if it is true, it would be severely damaging to Israel. The one thing that probably would counter that would be if the Americans themselves started resupplying Israel with the necessary military equipment needed to counter the Iranian ballistic missiles coming through. But yes, to answer your question, the dynamics would be severely changed in Iran's favour and to Israel's disadvantage if that is a true scenario.
And now that humanitarian rights groups report over 580 deaths in Iran, and of which nearly 240 civilians and at least 24 Israeli fatalities as well from Israeli media. So from media's perspective, how are different outlets presenting these civilian versus military casualties?
It's a very, very interesting question. I think Israel has got to the point now where the global mainstream media, I should say, has since October the 7th been so biased against Israel that I think from an Israeli perspective, the continuation of deaths in Iran, whether civilian deaths or otherwise, is not going to have an impact on the Israeli society nor on the Netanyahu government. And I'm pretty sure too that any Israeli deaths will be met with inertia by the United Nations, NGOs, global charities, because Israel is not a popular nation with those who are currently running the world order. And by that I mean the United Nations. I mean, just think about it. There are over 50 Islamic countries within the UN and one Jewish state. The UN is dominated by an anti-Israel agenda. And I think from an Israeli government point of view and from an Israeli society point of view, they've just thrown up their hands in despair and said, okay, we're going to live with this. Iran should have all the media advantages during this conflict. They can say, "Oh, Israel started the war. We were negotiating, with the nuclear arsenal, etc., etc." But I think in reality, the tit for tat missile launches from either side are going to continue, and unfortunately, civilians on both sides are going, as they always are, collateral damage, and they're going to be the ones that are going to suffer.
Thank you very much, Peter Baum, for joining us and bringing your expertise as a foreign editor